Jetta, at this point, you are the only one on this week. So yeah. I mean, I'll go through some stuff, but and I know we'll get some more people. Usually there's at least a handful to start, and then 10 or 15 people by the end of the session. But when I opened up the invite in the waiting room, I you were the only person outside of a bunch of people's recording bots in there that were actually in the waiting room. Yeah, thank you for the message. Good to see you back as usual. I think you are by far my most consistent participant on my weekly workshop, so I certainly appreciate it. I know with how consistent you are too, at attending, that you probably get a lot of redundant, information because unfortunately with these sales workshops, every probably I was just actually going over this, probably every 4 to 6 months, the lessons somewhat recycle and refresh because it's always the same stuff that we're getting asked. What are the common objections? What are the benefits that we're talking about? What are the KPIs that we can promise and say? So, and we always have new people coming in. So I'm kind of, doing little tweaks on lessons that I probably, already taught. And I guess that's going to be somewhat similar with anything. But with sales, there's only so much new information. You know what I mean? There's not new sales approaches or new sales psychology. That's all stuff that people have been doing for 100 years that I've been studying, but there's been sales psychology for a lot longer, prior to that. But it's all just some variation of spin-off. Now, what I do like about teaching modern sales specifically, it's a lot of those old sales lessons and sales psychology that were used in mainstream marketplaces. Now it's how do you successfully adapt that into a digital sales process and become successful and still get the kind of personal approach and the message to people. That's what I find fascinating. And that's kind of what I dive into in terms of like where I do research and I kind of nerd out to see how sales processes convert, how the difference is from an in-person sales process to a digital sales process and how to make them as closely similar, right, as possible. You can never make a personal process exactly the same in a digital sense, but you can find ways to make it more personal and that's kind of what I like to do with my sales approaches. I'm sure anybody that watches these, I know right now I'm talking to you more so, Georgetta, because you are the one on. But I think anybody that attends these or that does any sales can kind of appreciate a more personal approach where some people are very robotic in their sales style or they are rigid to a script. I like to be more organic with sales. I think having frameworks and foundations and knowledge gives you the ability to kind of freelance, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, on a sales call and just be organic. I think that really goes a long way, and that gets overlooked. I think some of the best feedback I get when I do a sales call, and I've mentioned this before on the seller resources document I give you guys, number 8 within there has a Google Doc with about 20 or so of my sales call recordings. And I know a few of them at minimum in there, but I get this kind of regularly. Hey, Ray, and this is at the end of the call. Hey, Ray, this was way different than any sales call I've ever been on. Hey, man, you didn't even try to hard sell me. You just asked me, what I was struggling with and offered solutions, right? Like when you can get that feedback on a 15 to 20-minute interaction the first time somebody engages with your company or brand, I think that goes a real long way in the market. And when I get that feedback, that just lets me know that my process is unique. It stands out. People appreciate it. They see the differences, the value, whatever that may be. And I kind of always try to bring that back to you guys. I was going to say at the top of this workshop that normally these are an hour long, and I actually only had 30 minutes today because I have to leave a little early from my house to pick up my daughter. She had an after school event today, so normally she's already on the bus, probably home by now, but today I got to go pick her up and leave my house in about 25 minutes. So I will be ending today's a little early. I see there's only a couple people on here. So yeah, Eric, I see you just hopped in, and I was just going over kind of recapping sales, philosophy, strategy, my approach on it, what I find fascinating and interesting, what I kind of tie into the lessons I teach here. But again, you just hopped on as I was explaining. Today's going to be a little shorter one. I didn't build out a whole lesson and game plan. I was going to keep this more of a Q&A. Now, I expected more than 2 or 3 of you guys to be on here. But Eric, specifically, I know I already asked Georgetta and you typed a couple things in the chat. Eric, any questions or anything specifically you came here for that you're looking to cover or anything you're struggling with? Feel free to either unmute and let me know or just type it in the chat and I'd be happy to go over that. And if I don't get anything, I have some stuff I can cover. Don't think I can't fill the time or bring you guys some value. But especially when I only have a couple people, I like to make these more personal and see if there's anything specifically that you're struggling on, working toward, or anything that you came on here trying to get more clarity or answers or just more comfortable on. So let me just double check the chat there. For some reason it just closed on my screen. There it is. Cool. Well, they're all from you, Georgetta. Thank you very much. Nope, I don't see anything in the comments. Cool. So I'll just go over some stuff. I'm going to leave the chat open here and keep it monitored. I didn't even know why that I had it closed out until I looked for it. So if you guys have any questions or any thoughts or anything you want me to cover, you want to stop me, just type something in the chat. Put a 1 in there if you want me to call on you at any point. And I think if I'm not mistaken, both Georgetta and Eric may have been on last week's session. I thought last week's was pretty good. And just to recap, again, for you two or anybody that might be watching the replay, last week we covered, and I built the whole lesson gauged upon probably the number one concern that I like to help clients with, and the number one question I see when people have enrolled and haven't quite got the results they wanted as quick as they wanted. So you're right. I talked about this a little last week. I don't want to be super redundant, but as you see in the highlighted segment there, right? I haven't monetized my data. I haven't monetized the data or my membership, my subscription yet. So last week's pretty much whole workshop was around this particular document. So what I did is last week when I first dropped this, obviously this video wasn't done and ready, but what I did is I put last week's workshop where, again, probably 80% of it was covering and going in depth over this document. So if anybody that's watching this again, whether you're live or watching on the replay, this document will be linked down below if you are watching it on the replay. And if you are here live and didn't get this for whatever reason last week, I am throwing this document that's on my screen right here in the chat. Again, as I mentioned, this was last week's full lesson. Last week's full workshop and module going over this doc is linked right here, the one I'm hovering my mouse over. But what I covered is really the 6 aspects to this. And I'm not going to go through it as much depth because number one, I have less time today. And number two, last week I went through in full. This is kind of a recap. But as I mentioned, for all of us that are reselling the data, number one, we have to have an outreach approach. So just make sure we identify ours. What is that outreach approach for you? Are you using multiple outreach approaches? I recommend using more than one channel. And within my business, Audience Lab, we use no less than 4 primary channels. And again, I've covered those very often. Happy to tell them again. We use paid ads, and we're probably spending right around 100 grand a month on our own ads. So paid ads, we use cold as well as warm email, but let's talk more about cold outreach. That's what our ads and that's what our cold email. We use what are called mutually beneficial partnerships, and that's kind of a combination in our business. We've kind of mixed in the affiliate side as part of our mutually beneficial partnership process, but I look at those as also 2 different things. So that's why I kind of specified affiliate as a sub-segment within our mutually beneficial partnership approach to landing new clients. And that's simply working with other business owners that also have my ideal audience, but don't provide the same service that can send people over to me. I can do the same for them. That could be looked at as referral business. I mean, I forge these partnerships in all kinds of different ways. And I've done lessons just on how to forge mutually beneficial partnerships, have resources and lessons all about that if you guys want to be more familiar. So that was 3 of our 4. And our last one is organic marketing. And again, that's a combination. When we first started, and when I first started, particularly online, my first couple of businesses, my organic outreach was more manual, more through the DMs and maybe my own content. Now that we do our organic, again, now that it's not just me, number one, we have more people doing it, but we do it through a lot more content marketing on multiple channels. I would like to think one of the big differences from 4 or 5 years ago, just launching Audience Lab and my prior business, which was all kind of got all of its revenue and success in first couple million just off appointment setting and organic outreach. Nowadays, again, I think we're a little more established of a brand. We've been in the marketplace. Actually, you know what lets you know you're established is when other brands, which I did a post about this a week or 2 ago, I'm happy to discuss more if anybody finds this fascinating or has any questions. But other brands are now using Audience Lab, us, as the category king and their ad campaigns to be compared to. So 2 data companies I saw within the last couple of weeks, and you guys that are on Facebook a lot that are, mentioning data and Audience Labs, you're probably getting hit with similar ads or content from other companies, but there's a minimum of 2 other companies out there right now saying, hey, are you currently using Audience Lab? We're an alternative. So like they're starting their ad campaign with my company name in their headline, that lets you know that you have some status in whatever niche or industry. When people are kind of labeling you as the category king to compare themselves to and as an alternative. So when I see those brands, and I actually commented on one of them, hey, thanks for getting my company name out there as the category king in this space. I appreciate you guys putting my brand name into your ad copy, right? So found that was interesting. But What I mean by that is I mean to say, again, as your company or your brand gets more established, more, credible in the market, I think we can use organic marketing in the way that we've grown to do it now with it's through a lot more content marketing on multiple channels. So we have our own Audience Lab YouTube channel, right? Our own Audience Lab IG page, where in the past we were doing this all through our personal and manual accounts. Now we're getting content that gets created once, dumped into, some type of portal where we store it all. It doesn't really matter what you're using for that. And then we have a organic publishing team that goes in there, pulls out all the best clips, and then goes and launches those on multiple different platforms. So that also, we do that for a couple of different reasons. We do, three variations of, I would say, copy based on the sophistication of our audience, meaning we have some content for organic that we consider for more top of funnel buyers, cold traffic, people that know nothing about Audience Lab. Then people that are familiar with the industry have a little more sophistication. We have kind of middle of funnel or mid intent copy and creative we put together. And then people that are already aware of us, that already know about us, that have been referred over, that are very warm. Again, different messaging and content we use to get them to convert. So our content, I would like to say, is kind of a three-tier strategy in terms of we know each video we're putting out is geared toward an entry-level market, a mid-intent, or somebody that's familiar, with us and the whole data provider industry, I would say, for lack of a better terms. They know Audience Lab. They probably know a couple competitors. They could probably drop a couple off the top of their head. Those people, I'm going to use different messaging and content as opposed to somebody that knows nothing about data in their business and knows nothing about Audience Lab. So same way we do with ads, right? I mean, I think when we create ad copy, we should be very, very particular and intentional about who we're creating it for. Am I creating for a market that knows about me or a market that doesn't? Because I should have two separate creative and two separate audiences. Those are totally different people at that point. So again, those are the four we use. That was a very long explanation, but we use for our brand, not to say we don't use a couple of other things, we do, but the four primary acquisition channels we use at Audience Lab: paid ads, cold email, mutually beneficial partnerships, and affiliate and organic and content marketing, which again, for us is a combination of punching out content, but we also have DM setters and appointment setters following up with those leads. So again, now that we know our approaches, number two on the document that I covered last week and that we're recapping today is obviously now is to test, optimize, dial in the messaging, whether it's ad copy, whether I'm sending out emails, whether it's LinkedIn messaging, whether I'm sending out SMS text, whatever it is. We need to, now that we have our channel dialed in, we need to start to get some consistent metrics flowing through there in terms of sample size so we can validate and tweak whatever. We need to know what our open rates are, what our conversion rates are, what our click-through rate, what our cost per lead acquisition. Once we start to get those metrics, we can gauge whether our message is hitting right and whether we need some tweaking. Do I need to be more direct, less direct? Try more visual aids in my presentations. Maybe that'll be more engaging. So we can make subtle tweaks to kind of dial that in. Number three is knowing what type of sales process you're building out. As I covered last week in much more depth than I'm going to today, but I'm going to really specify what I highlighted. I highly recommend a manual two-call sales process. I find that most effective for, number one, my company, but for almost all of our resellers. Now, I did talk a little bit about last week about where an automated sales process works within our data, features. I gave some examples of a couple of websites that clients put up and the type of market they're specifically targeting to have an automated checkout process and or funnel running and working. But again, that's the outlier and the vast minority. 95%, if not more, of my clients are doing sales calls and using a two-call process that I recommend and I give right away in that document there. That's linked within number three. Number four, I give you a little example of a quick three-step funnel you can use to build out your, in this case, I did it from the super pixel perspective of selling the super pixel. I did give an example of people trying to set, within this document under number four, I gave an example of a couple of clients or at least one client's website that is selling things automated and told his process, but I did specify that's the outlier. This is a blueprint to copy if you are targeting that very select market and you think it'll work for you, but I still highly recommend doing the manual process, which I walk you through in the other two steps there. Number five, now that we have, our messaging, our outreach channels, we're getting people into our sales process and we're starting to close deals. We need to know the client agreement once we close deals. how to set that all up properly, and next steps. That's covered there in the quick little number 5 tutorial link. Number 6, I always think it's very important now that we have closed somebody and got a contract signed to make sure we've already, and if we haven't already, this should be done on our first onboarding call, building the proper expectations and what's needed to fulfill. And as I tell you guys, for our data clients, at minimum, more specifically to our low fulfillment model agencies that are just trying to provide the data and be kind of hands off. But I like to create these 2 videos of A and B listed here for the client. Now, sometimes I do that in just one video, or you could do it in separate videos, but it's basically saying, hey, now that you bought this list from me and you're going to go embed it into your marketing or advertising campaigns, Bob's Roofing Company, this is what I recommend. I've worked with a dozen other roofers that have got lists from me, and this is the 4 most predominant ways that they monetize the data. Number 1 was through paid ad campaigns. Number 2 was through cold email outreach. Number 3 was through SMS campaigns. And number 4 was cold calling. So those are the 4 best ways. Now, on the second part of that, B, to be compliant within our ad campaigns, because you are a roofing company and you're pulling the audiences, there is no limits. Your data is going to be 100% compliant. You can loop it in there. And I truly think, Bob, that we can get your message and your creative in front of the biggest audience with the best messaging the fastest through paid ads, which is why it was number 1 on the list. And I think it has the quickest and best ROI, right? Number 2 is email, to be compliant with an email, because we have a first party database, Bob, which means, just so you understand first party compliance, anybody within our super graph, it doesn't matter how you get that person. It doesn't matter if it's from a list I gave you, a pixel resolution from somebody that bounced off your website, if it was somebody we enriched off your existing database list, doesn't matter if they came out of our profile. At one point, they did tick the box and agreed to share their information with us and our partners, and that's how they ended up in our super graph. So that makes it first party. They did give consent to have their information entered into our database. To be compliant with first party data in email, you need 4 things in your email. You need your name, your business address, and a clear opt out. To be compliant within SMS, you need 3 of those 4 things. You don't need the business address. So your name, your business name, and a clear opt out. And within cold calling, again, Bob, if you currently cold call to do a majority of your lead gen, and that's kind of the engine that runs your business, that one might be more lucrative than number 4 for you. I'm just telling you what I see generically across the industry. That's not always going to be the same for every business owner. Those are very general numbers. So if your business is built off a cold calling foundation, you have a call center and outreach reps, you might be using it that way. To being compliant with that, what I recommend, as you probably already know, if you have a call center or have guys dialing, any list I provide you that I pull off the platform, I highly suggest and recommend running it through one outside source of a do not call list registry database, and just make sure none of the names jive. I wouldn't want to see you call 3 people in a row that are on the do not call list and get shut down from compliance, start to get fines, restrictions, all the things that those 3-letter agencies can come in and do when we're not in compliance with our outreach. So again, I make a couple of quick little videos. I could do that in one. Sometimes I do it in separate ones, depends on the business and the objective. I think that stuff just goes so hand in hand that we're talking about best practices on reactivation and then how to be compliant within those reactivation. They kind of go hand in hand. So there's almost no reason to do it in 2 separate ones, other than I have clients ask me just about the compliance or just about the reactivation, and they don't really want to hear the other aspect. So sometimes, just for simpler and more digestible content, that's the only reason I separate it. For a client in your guys' shoes, I would probably always create it in one tutorial video. And again, you can either make that evergreen and make it relevant to all your clients, or you could shoot a custom one for each client, do it just like I did. Hey, Bob, for your roofing company, this is what I'd recommend. I think that goes a little further and lets them know that, number 1, this is custom, and number 2, you are building this out, again, in conjunction with what you feel is going to be the best tactic and approach for that client, rather than all clients generally. Okay, you can make it a little more personable. And again, last thing, as I highlight, guys, these 6 things are great. That's what every one of us needs to do in some way, shape, or form to land new clients, to start monetizing the data. If we're not, maybe we're already monetizing it, but we're just not doing it consistently. Maybe I closed a deal when I came in and now I've been cold for a month or 2. Go back and revamp these 6 things. I guarantee some gap or something is missing within there, whether it's a certain portion, whether it's copy, whether it's a whole thing that you just left out of these. Shoot, I'm not doing the agreement. Oh, shoot, I'm not going to a sales process. Shoot, I've never tested and optimized my messaging. Maybe there's certain steps you're overlooking, but all 6 of those are contingent, of course, upon being proficient with building audiences. So as I always say, and as it says here in highlighted, if you feel like you are not, you are such, you aren't quite, if you don't feel that you're such, chopping over my own words here. I recommend going back to the Getting Started with Audience Lab module, which the tutorials has kind of all the little intricacies and nuances within the features of the platform. So you are more proficient with building audiences, you are more confident, and start attending a data strategy workshop or two weekly. Really quickly, if you go back to that module and you attend a couple of those weeks, you're going to go from competent to proficient at audience building a lot quicker. Not very confident on building a list to very confident I know how to build an effective, proficient list for my audience. And again, I think this is really, really effective and very relevant to anybody that is reselling the data. So that's why I just wanted to recap. Again, I know one or two of you guys in here joined, or I admitted, as the session started. Maybe you didn't see the link to that document I covered. So I just went here and dropped it in the chat again. So time stamped in the Zoom chat here at 3:21 Eastern. That Google Doc is what I just covered. And within there, again, for anybody that hopped on late, number one in there is last week's workshop where I covered that in even more depth than I just went through it. I just went through it in about a 17-minute recap. Last week, I probably spent about 40 or 50 minutes really just on going into that. And I went into a little more depth about each one of those. And I opened some of the other resources within that doc and went through those individually. I just didn't feel the need to do that here being a recap session number one. And you guys all have access to that document. You can open up the little individual resources within there and kind of check them all out yourself. So awesome. That's kind of what I'm going to cover in the recap. I think JP and Stacia, I forgot how to pronounce it. I know I got it wrong with one of those. I think you guys hopped in as I was already into my thing, but I said at the top of these workshop, guys, this is usually an hour. I have to actually hop off here in about 7 or 8 minutes. I can only do a half hour today. My daughter, who I mentioned, is usually already, she's already home from school usually, but she had an after school event. There's no late bus anyway. I got to leave my house in about 7 or 8 minutes to go pick her up today. So I only had a half hour today. But I'd like to just recap it with, did anybody hop on, or does anybody have any questions they would like me to cover, either about that recap lesson I just went through or anything sales related when it comes to the data? If anybody has any questions, go type a 1 in the chat right now, and I will just call on you. There's only 5 or 6 of you, so I doubt anyone will be really talking over each other. So feel free to just unmute and ask questions. But I don't really have much else today. Again, it was a shorter session. I was just going to make it more of a Q&A and a recap, and I kind of covered all that now. So I'm going to stop and take a breath for a minute, see if anybody has any questions. And if not, I'll give it another minute or two. If not, we'll just hop off here. But please spend the time, if you weren't on last week's workshop or you just hopped into this one late, go through that resource I dropped here in the Zoom chat and kind of re-go through those resources, or go through for the first time those resources, and just kind of check off each one of these. Have I done this, and is this done well? Or should I get a little more training on this? Or should I go through a module? Because I think a lot of us, we write a few copy variations, we just launch it and we just judge it and we say successful or not, and then we scrap it and we go to something else. What I like to do with copy in terms of when I talked about testing and tweaking and optimizing message is, if something fails, I kind of want to shelve it and say, when I launched this out to the market, I first wrote it, I launched it because I thought it would work, right? I personally, and hopefully you guys aren't doing this, I personally don't publish content or marketing, whether it's an email message, an ad, a post, that I don't think will be effective, right? So if it's not, I kind of want to run it back through my lab and put it into a research. For me, and any of you guys that know me for a long time or through my other brand, I plug that back through my PDocs research tools and see what I may be missing. Now, PDocs really simply stands for pains, desires, obstacles, common beliefs, and steroids, aka attention grabbers in the marketplace. Those are the foundational components behind, the psychology to why people will or won't get engaged by your marketing, your messaging, your ads, all that stuff. So when I have a campaign with anything that doesn't hit the way I thought, I kind of shelve it and I run it through testing. And I found a lot of times that whole message wasn't off. I was right. It should have worked, but I needed to tweak one word, or I needed to phrase it in a question instead of a statement. Sometimes it's just a little subtle tweak to an existing message or messaging, whether that's short or long, that just needs a subtle tweak. Sometimes I have long messaging that doesn't convert. I take away 2/3 of it and just drop, the meat and potatoes, and then it converts. So again, a lot of times when we have messaging that doesn't work, it doesn't mean it sucked. It just means something was off. I don't recommend just scrapping that as a failure. I recommend binning that and then kind of pressure testing it, see what missed there. and go back through what is the primary angle, hook, or outcome that is from this message. And if you guys can't define that, then neither can your audience. So all you have to do is ask that question to yourself and say, how do I word this so that it is defined with the message, the outcome, the angle, or the hook, and it is very clear. And sometimes I talked about this a little last week. Sometimes we get a little cute or clever with our messaging and we lose the clarity of it. When we do that, we do what's called going over the market's head. When it's not clear and it doesn't kind of punch them in the face that, hey, this guy has a data platform that can save me money on my ad campaigns. If that's not clear from your first message, you probably lost that guy and he's, he's either not going to reply, it went over his head, he doesn't see value or interest, or he's never going to, he's never going to buy your product. So we want to be very clear with our messaging. For the Pixel landing page, do you suggest I list pricing at that point? Yeah, you can, and that's a great question. Since it's the only one, and I have 3 or 4 more minutes, let me bring it up and just show you real quick here. So, and again, I don't know if you have it open on your screen, but I'll just show you what I'm talking about for anyone that's wondering. So within the build out your DaaS sale funnel, number 4 on this, when I open up this document, number 1 on here gives an example of a website, I should say a small landing page, that one of our clients named Jeremy set up just to sell the Pixel. So let's open up his web page. So as you see really quick, the smartest little pixel that prints you money, lease the monster pixel, list the monster pixel, same AI-powered tracking tech that's used by 8-figure ad agencies, turn anonymous clicks into verified buyers. He gives a few of the main metrics. Hey, I could show you 3x retargeting, up to an 80% match rate, which, guys, I still don't recommend using that number. Not sure why Jeremy did there. You guys can use whatever numbers. I tell you what I normally see on our Pixel website, somewhere between a 30 to 60% rate. And normally I like to make the lowest case expectations. I like to say guaranteed 30% match rate. And if I deliver closer to 60, that's great. Then we under-promised and over-delivered. But when we start at a higher percentage, then I even anticipate we're setting ourselves up for over-promising and under-delivering, which I don't like to do, but this is your guys' own web pages. You can use the higher numbers. I mean, if you want to make it sound good, not my recommendation. So anyway, he mentions a few of the major metrics. What I usually mention on a lot of my pages, it might be a little different depending on if I'm highlighting the pixel or the audiences. But I do always highlight, hey, you're pulling from a super graph of over 280 million users, approximately 1.9 trillion behaviors, and up to 60 billion URLs scanned and searched daily, and where I can go find you your in-market audience from there. Those are some of the things I highlight. I highlight a drop in cost per lead and acquisition from anywhere from about 25 to 40% when you're using my in-market lists. Certain things like that. But as more to your question, I get sidetracked as I do. More to your question there, you'll see he does have pricing on his website right here. So he shows you, hey, full monthly licensing fee, $9.97. There's a one-time setup for me to install, optimize, do all the configuration, and one-time setup fee. So your charge would be $14.97 today and $9.97 moving forward each month. Or you can buy the whole yearly subscription for 20% off everything, save yourself about $2,400 and get the yearly price right here. So to answer your question, yes, you can put it on the page. What I really specified when I covered this lesson last week and went more in depth into it, and in this guy's particular example here, was he's selling primarily to e-commerce and physical product store owners, shops like that. With that particular niche or industry, I can see setting up an automated funnel and having it work. But if I'm working with more service-based industry, more of a high-ticket back-end agency, I still want to meet with them personally and assess and do their own kind of pixel forecast myself, and I want to make it more of a manual process. I only see the automated pixel sales process work really well when you're selling to people selling physical products, e-com, drop shipping, and in certain tech and SaaS spaces. Outside of those industries, it's very difficult to get the automated system, and I highly recommend going to a manual sales process. Those are some of the big differences and some of the kind of predetermining factors, I would say there, Stacia, in terms of what works with, the automated page. So hopefully that answers your question, and I think I elaborated a bit more. Okay, we're right on the spot here at the bottom of the hour, guys. I'm going to hop off and end this one early. As I mentioned, I got to go pick up my daughter from an after-school activity. I will upload this recording and this replay into the school channel before the end of the day. And if anybody needs anything before my next workshop, feel free to shoot me a DM in school. I'm always very pretty prompt with replying and always happy to answer your guys' stuff there. Thank you for your participation, questions, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.